Glad to know you're still with us. More than a year after fuel subsidies were scrapped and the naira floated, the government insists its reforms are laying the groundwork for stability and growth. Yet for many citizens, life has only become harder. Food inflation remains elevated, petrol and transport costs have tripled, and unemployment remains stubbornly high. On its part, the International Monetary Fund has applauded the bold reforms, but ordinary Nigerians see little relief. Critics warn that without a clear roadmap, reforms risk entrenching hardship rather than easing it. This conversation asks, are the reforms truly a cure or just deepening Nigeria's economic pain? And what policy mix is needed to balance short-term survival with long-term recovery? To answer those questions, I have joining me Victor Aluyi, co-managing partner, Aztran Global. Thank you so much, Mr. Aluyi, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
I'm not sure I can hear you, but I'll just go on ahead and ask the first question. Now, this report claims Nigeria's economic reforms are failing its people. Do you agree with that assertion, and why?
I don't completely agree with that assertion. I belong to the school of thought that believes that these reforms are necessary. These reforms are actually needed. We've waited long enough for these sorts of reforms. Unfortunately, they have to come at this time that, they have come. So, again, I make the...
Mr. Aluyi, I'm afraid I can't hear you. Maybe, I don't know if you can check your audio.
I can hear you loud and clear.
All right, just go ahead then.
Okay, I was just talking about the fact that, I don't agree with the assertion that... these reforms are not needed. I believe that they are needed. I believe that they are very essential as a matter of fact, and people have, to sustainable economic growth for Nigeria. I mean, the debate certainly is out there as to how these reforms have been carried out. Obviously, the impact is very strong and it is there. But like I said, I liken this to a massive ship that's trying to make a 90-degree turn. That turn takes quite some time. As a matter of fact, in the midst of that turn, at some point, it doesn't look like that ship is even trying to make any turn. So I think we're in the throes and we're in the midst of, these reforms, typically reforms are not easy. They usually come with, these kinds of pains. And unfortunately, these are some of the things that we have to go through to really lay the groundwork for a sustainable future for our economy.
Well, talking about that, I mean, you and other economists, governments and analysts insist that these painful reforms are the bitter medicine Nigeria sort of needs to recover. But many Nigerians believe that medicine tastes more like maybe poison, worsening the struggles of daily life rather than healing them. I mean, talk to us about this. I mean, even those who once held on to hope are now drained and weary. So what are we looking at here? Why is it taking so much time? Is it as a result of the fact that maybe so much had gone wrong before the reform started? Or is it because the reforms were not targeted, staggered, and phased? Why is it taking so long?
So I'll pick up from the analogy that you gave. I mean, if you're ill and you go to the hospital, you take that medicine. It is very bitter. In fact, for the first couple of days, you might not even feel like you're getting better, but a lot of work is being done in your body, and over time you would get better. So again, I liken that to the situation, that we are going through. I still, stand on the fact that reforms are not easy. So I'll give you examples. There are countries that have carried out reforms akin to what we have carried out within pretty much the same period, that we carried it out. So I will talk about Argentina, for instance. Argentina has carried out very, very far-reaching reforms, both fiscal reforms, subsidy removal, structural reforms. In the immediate aftermath of those reforms, you saw quite some pain. Inflation spiked significantly. As a matter of fact, in 2022, inflation in Argentina spiked to 94%. By the middle of 2023, that number had gone to over 200%, right? If you look at their currency, it was also devalued initially by about 50%. That went up to almost 200% devaluation. If you look at the standard of living, the poverty level, in the immediate aftermath of those reforms, things got significantly worse. However, by the middle of this year, July this year, if you look at the inflation situation in Argentina, it's about 36%. The currency is a lot more stable now, and a lot of other things are beginning to look better with that economy. So if you look at the Nigerian situation, you look at our inflation, for instance, that number is steadily creeping downwards. You look at the exchange rate, it's beginning to become a lot more stable, where people can actually plan and make, strategic decisions based on the fact that they have a really good idea of where they are going to get USD for their businesses and all of that. So there's a lot more stability. The debate as to how the reform was carried out, the way whether it should have been staggered or phased, really is probably even more political than it is economic. But I think that the path that we are on, as far as these reforms go, if they are sustained, I believe that we are on a path, of really strong growth going forward for the Nigerian economy.
All right, you talked about something that I feel I need to, take you on. You talked about the exchange rate being stable, but some persons will say that this stability, you might as well call it technically managed by the Central Bank of Nigeria, saying its activities in the market. What do you have to say about that? And also, some are also saying, of course, we can talk about stability and how exporters or importers are able to plan, manufacturers are able to plan, knowing this is the amount it is and nobody is scared of sudden devaluation. But what about the purchasing power? What about what that 1,500 naira can actually get you compared to maybe, early 2023? And that, of course, is the pain that the everyday Nigerian is feeling.
Again, that pain is understandable. Unfortunately, the pain comes with these reforms. Now, so I was speaking to someone just last week. They're trying to do some imports. They put in a bid to buy about $4 million from the bank in the morning. By evening, they got their $4 million and they were able to go ahead with their business. Before these reforms, you couldn't even get $100,000. You would have to wait in queue for maybe a year. And then there was a huge gap between the official and private market. It created quite, a lot of, deadweight loss, if you will, for the economy. That wasn't exactly great for us as an economy. Yes, you could purchase more then than you could now, but I think that the overall multiplier effect on our economy, the ability for businesses to source these funds when they can, the ability to plan and know that. I mean, back then, if you wanted to buy for the exchange rate purpose, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't even know how much you're going to get. But now it's a lot better. And again, saying that, it's just movements in the market. What the CBN has done really is to create a framework, if you will, or an enabling environment that has engendered confidence in the Nigerian economy. And that's why you're seeing the sort of stability that we're seeing in the FX situation. I mean, don't forget that, FX reserves have also continued to build. Crude oil production has also continued to climb. These are macro indicators that continue to support what these reforms are and also continue to indicate confidence in the Nigerian economy.
I totally get that. But of course, when we look at, FBI reports, that's the report on inflow. Yes, capital inflows. We see that FBI takes the larger chunk, over 90%. And when you also look at that, you find out that they're just money market instruments. So at the end of the day, what I wanted you to talk about sustainably, having that current, that foreign exchange, so much so that it's not hot money that may not be there tomorrow.
Okay, so FPIs have always been the largest contributor to capital inflows as far back as, if you check as far back as 10, even 12 years ago. So there's really nothing new there. However, the point is that we need palliative measures that sort of kind of get us across the line. I agree with you that these are hot monies. Also understand that, crude oil production is rising, right? Reserves are growing. So as crude oil production continues to rise, again, these are reform efforts to ensure that what we get in terms of, production, in terms of those dollar earnings also continue to rise. Also, if you look at our trade surplus, if you compare our trade surplus, if you look at, I think, July of 2025, compare that number to July of 2022, that figure has gone up more than 10 times. So these are, already things that are working in tandem to ensure that sustainably we are able to manage this exchange rate situation. Yes, what we are seeing now, you can term as a lot of hot money flows. But the truth of the matter is that as these hot monies tend to sort of dissipate or go away, particularly in a situation where the carry trade our interest rates start to moderate, we would have been able to build buffers that enable us to take on that challenge and maintain an exchange rate that remains stable. So the ability for the government to do this now is premised on the fact that these reforms have kicked in and these reforms are in place. Like I highlighted earlier, you have stuff like, crude oil production that is rising. You have trade surplus that is increasing. These are things that will certainly support the exchange rates going forward, even if these hot monies leave.
All right, so I'd like you to speak to us about something. I mean, we cannot keep saying that, this is something that it may be a rite of passage for development without putting blueprints or things in place to ensure that the effect is cushioned and all of those. So looking at what's happening right now, do you think that the government is really keen on whether they are short-term fixes or cushions or even long-term, solutions to what we are currently going through? Is there anything that points to the fact that the government is seriously working on these?
Well, in terms of short-term fixes, long-term cushions, I think the reforms from a policy standpoint would work for themselves over time. Now, whether the government can do a lot more to ameliorate and cushion the pains that the populace is going through, absolutely. There's with whatever it is that is being done, there's always a lot more that could be done. And I want to believe that most certainly as time goes on, with more fiscal elbow room, the government is certainly going to be able to do more, in that wise. But again, if you look at other countries that implemented these reforms, they did that for instance, in Egypt, there was a sort of a staggered approach to the removal of subsidies. You also had provisions for social safety nets as well. And that kind of helped, but again, it sort of prolonged, if you will, the benefits that were to accrue from those reforms. Truth of the matter is that the jury is really out on how these reforms should have been carried out. You have a lot of opinions on the tactics itself in terms of implementing these reforms. But I think I kind of focus on the sort of benefits that we stand to gain from the reforms that we have seen. I think for me, what is really critical is that we stay the course on these reforms so that we do not become recursive in what we do, such that we've taken 2 steps forward and we then go ahead and take 5 steps backward.
That's quite interesting. But look, let's take a look at some things that a lot of Nigerians would want to see. If you want to talk about inflation, there are certain things that we expect the Nigerian government to do. I mean, it's not enough to throw out those good numbers, whether it's NBS numbers or CBN numbers on one thing or the other, but there are issues. I mean, I want to call them structural issues that have not been addressed. Whether you want to talk about beg your pardon, insecurity in food producing areas. That's something. Or you want to talk about infrastructure, you want to talk about the breakdown in logistics, you want to look at some of these other things. Those things do not necessarily seem to get the attention that a lot of Nigerians would want. So how then do we say that we're making progress when structural issues, structural challenges, fundamental issues remain?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And really at the core of our price challenges are really structural issues, such that monetary policy in itself is insufficient at addressing them. And like you highlighted, these are structural issues. Structural issues take quite some time to deal with or to address. The infrastructure that we lack is not going to be built in a year or even 2. But I think that, as we continue to build on top of the various things that we have done, we should see improvement. The truth of the matter is that it takes quite a lot, concerted efforts across the various levels of government, not just the federal government, the subnationals and even local governments have to pull their own weight in addressing a lot of the infrastructure bottlenecks that we face that continue to plague the price stability situation that we confront here in Nigeria. So yeah, it certainly would take some time. That is just the truth. There is no quick fix in terms of structural issues. There is no quick fix in terms of infrastructure dealing or addressing infrastructure issues. There are no quick fixes there. That is just the truth. The hope really is that government does pay very strong attention to that. And I emphasize that this is not just a central government issue. Subnational governments, local governments also have to pull their weight here.
Well, that's quite interesting. So, I mean, I remember you said something earlier, and you just said something else that reminded me of it. So for how long do Nigerians have to wait before we begin to see the transmission into the real economy?
I mean, that's tough to say. I don't sit in that policy chair, so I really can't say for sure. But I mean, again, like I highlighted earlier, we need to keep the pace. These reforms need to continue, and we need to stay on point with these reforms. Once we do that, I think that sooner rather than later, we will begin to see some of those impacts come through. It will begin to trickle in, most certainly. It is unfortunate that we have to go through these hard times and these hardships to sort of bear these reforms. But I feel like this is the price that we kind of have to pay to ensure that we set the background, if you will, for something that is sustainable going forward.
All right, so let's close on this. I mean, the authors of the report we've been referring to made three recommendations. Number one, they talked about social protection and food security. Number two, infrastructure-led growth. And number three, institutional accountability. I think we've talked a bit about infrastructure-led growth. I'm not sure if we really dealt with that. But what do you make of these recommendations? Or would you also add to the list?
I mean, the recommendations are fine. They make a lot of sense. But these are things that don't happen overnight. That is just the truth. I mean, institutional accountability, infrastructural issues, they don't happen overnight. I think for me, the key thing is to really keep at it, right? Is to keep at it. And I also continue to emphasize that we need to start focusing on what's happening at subnational levels, what's happening at local levels. There's a bit more resources that are available to them now. I think Nigerians need to be aware of that and take that into cognizance. And I think that if that is done from a concerted effort level, things will probably even get better quicker, than we probably even envisage.
All right, Victor Aluyi, if I get you correctly, you're saying we're on the right path. We just need to keep at it while the government does other things to ensure that the pain is cushioned. And it's a long-term thing, so we probably need to wait some more. We'll keep waiting. And if we wait more than 3 years, I'll come for you. Thank you so much, Victor Aluyi. You said?
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I've been speaking with Victor Aluyi, co-managing partner, Aztran Global, on that particular one.